Welcome to our weekly Timeless Principles for Extraordinary Living with Dr. Alex. Dr. Alex believes that you were born for extraordinary exploits, to be an exhibition of divine abundance. Today's session, as all others, will inspire you to experience extraordinary living. Join Dr. Alex now.
Welcome to Timeless Principles with me, Dr. Alex. I am so excited that you have selected to connect with our channel. I want to just take a minute and express our words of appreciation to all those who have subscribed. I want to say to you, thank you for subscribing. Thank you for liking us. Thank you for sharing with others. And importantly, thank you for sending those comments. We appreciate them very much. And continue with the great work. Well, today I continue with our series 818. As you might remember what it is the series on the thinking beings. Thinking beings. I challenge you that this is a life-transforming series. Don't miss every episode that we are doing on this series. Today, join me as we engage episode 4 of 818. Episode 4 of 818. And this episode, for me, I have called it the basics for the thinking process. So I'm beginning now to enter into some of the basics and the technical aspects of the thinking process. The couple of episodes of saying why it's important to think. I want you to remember some of the statements we made. One of them is that long before any philosopher from anywhere in the world, before they started to talk about thinking, the scriptures had already spoken on this matter. One of the statements I quoted previously was in Proverbs 23, verse 7. In the NSB version, the first part of that verse says, "For as he thinks within himself, so he is." In other words, thinking defines who we are more than our dress code. Thinking defines who we are more than the color of our skin or the orientation of our gender. As he thinks within himself, so is he. And that's why then we make this statement, we are thinking beings living inside a biological container. We are not just a lump of meat that's hanging on bones. Okay. Today, we are therefore getting a little bit technical in the thinking process. For that reason, I will make these segments a little bit smaller chunks because I want to engage maybe each episode 3 or 4 basics of the thinking process as we get into the technical side, as you will see in the several episodes that will come after this. I want to start with a broad statement as we get into the technical side. The broad statement is the following: thinking must lead to choices. Let me say that again. Thinking has an outcome. And the number one and primary outcome of thinking, it's choices. Now, destinies are a result of the choices we select. I want you to think about this. In other words, thinking is therefore central to our pursuit of destiny. Why, Dr. Alex, you ask? Because thinking is what leads us to choices. And the choices we make determine the destinies we end up with. In other words, where you and I are today, where we find ourselves in life, is a product of our thinking process. I want to put this global statement so that we capture it. Thinking is therefore a wonderful gift that God has given humanity. That's what separates us from other creatures and from other living things. We are thinking beings is a wonderful gift. We must treasure it, and importantly, as we begin today, we must learn to use it wisely. I will engage a few basics on how we use it wisely. For today, let's look at three of the basics of the thinking process. Three of the basics of the thinking process. The first level of all the basics, and I want all those who are listening to capture this. At the base of the thinking process, we have to acknowledge that there are always many possibilities and probabilities that are before us at any given moment. Even now, while we are listening to this, you have possibilities and probabilities. This is the primary basic thing in the thinking process. Most of the time, people think there's only one possibility that they have before them. In fact, when people have reached the stage where they take their own lives, it's because in some way they have arrived at the thinking that there's only one possibility. I want us to acknowledge today the first basic of the thinking process is that there are always many possibilities and probabilities before you, before me, at any given time. Let your consciousness acknowledge that. That's the first basic. The second basic of the thinking process is that through thinking, now that's very important, and that's what many people get it wrong. Through thinking, we have to identify from all the many possibilities, we have to identify the viable possibilities with their probabilities. I want to use these pens. I hope you can see here. I'm just using these 4 colors. The second basic is that I have to use thinking, look at this today, to identify. You know, if I was preaching, I would say the word identify, but we are not preaching here. You have to use thinking to identify the viable possibilities with their probabilities. In other words, at any one time in your life, acknowledge that there are many, many, many possibilities. However, it is through the thinking process that we identify the viable ones. From here, at the bottom, at my hand, to the top, I have the green possibility. I have the blue possibility. Oh God, I hope I get my colors right. Then I have the orange possibility. Then I have the red possibility. At any one time, I have a lot, and I have then to use my thinking. So, the first role of thinking is identification of possibilities. Where people get to the point that they say, I must end my life, is where the thinking process is so affected that they can no longer identify possibilities with their probabilities. Each of these possibilities, if I was moving from here to here, each of these have their own probability of success. One probability may be very low, another probability may be very high. And I get to identify that by the thinking process. So ask yourself each time you wake up in the morning, ask yourself whenever you have to do something, have I taken time to identify the viable possibilities with their probabilities. It's one thing to just say, well, there is a possibility, there is a possibility, there is a possibility. Well, red, orange, I hope it's orange, blue, green are the possibilities. I'm therefore just going in all of them. No, you've got to identify the possibilities with their probabilities. Then the third basic of the thinking process is that now that I have identified the possibilities, I now have to use the thinking process to collapse these possibilities into a choice. I collapse these possibilities, red, green, blue, orange, red, into a choice. I just want to try and use this. I hope you can see where you are. I have collapsed possibility green, possibility blue, possibility orange, possibility red into a choice called purple. The thinking process then, as basic number 3, it travels from the bottom to the end of each and come back, travel to the end of the other one, come back, travel to the end of the other one, come back. It's the thinking. I'm using the thinking process to see where each of these possibilities lead me, and then I say, I'm not going to go to all of them, because if I go to all of them, I'm actually going nowhere. I'm going to collapse the possibilities into one viable choice. Let me take some thought and challenge you here. You see, where you are today is not the only possibility that you could have taken. Somewhere in your past, there were possibilities. But somehow, you collapsed them into a choice. And where you are today is a consequence of a thinking process. What you are today is not the only being you could have become. There were possibilities of beings you could have been. For example, I could have been a medical doctor, you could have been a preacher, you could have been a scientist, you could have been a driver of a truck, you could have, whatever, there were possibilities, and you collapse them into one choice. Whoever you got married with was not the only person you could have been married to. There were obviously several ones. There was so and so, and so and so, and so and so, and so and so. And you collapse them into one choice. In my case, I collapse them into one choice called Busi. What I want to say about these three is that the saddest amongst many people is that we don't use the thinking process sufficient enough to select a choice. Somehow it feels like when you wake up in the morning, there's only one choice. It's to go to the job that you go to. There's only one choice. It's to do what you are doing. There's only one choice. It feels like that. I want you to awaken, remember my colors, whenever you think about thinking, that awaken your consciousness that there are always possibilities. That's the number one basic of thinking. Then collapse the identify the viable ones of all these possibilities, and then collapse them into one choice. I need to emphasize that again and again. As I said, I want to make it small chunks, that what are the basics of thinking is to acknowledge that at any one time, there is a number of possibilities with their probabilities. I have to use my thinking process to first identify the viable ones. And then I use my thinking process to collapse them into one choice. Here is the daily exercise that I want to encourage you in based on these basics. May you be awakened every day you wake up to the truth that you are a thinking being. The fact that you are so used to wake up on this side of the bed, and when you finish waking up, you go to this thing first, and you finish that, you go to this thing first. You are not a robot. You are not a machine. You are a thinking being. Be conscious on daily basis. This is the exercise I want you to try. Be conscious on daily basis that before me, there are several possibilities, and they each have their probabilities. Be deliberate in deploying your thinking process every day to at least, even if you don't do many things, at least identify viable possibilities. Every day, identify viable possibilities. Before you drive that car out of your house, identify viable possibilities. And then collapse them into a choice. Just want to say this when it comes to the choice. Once the choice has been made, get on with the business of pursuing it. You know, a number of people don't get far quickly because they spend too much time on the viable possibilities. You ask them, have you started doing something? It says, no, I'm still thinking about it. Especially for us black people, we take so much time under the tree thinking about the possibilities, and never getting to the choice. Even when we've made the choice, we're still worried about the possibilities. Get on with the business of doing the job. So that's the basics I wanted just to outline today. And then I want to just get a little bit into the technical side of the thinking process. Just a little bit, then we'll pull this to the end. Here is some thoughts regarding the technical side. I'm giving the technical side because we'll then carve it together with the basics. The thinking process operates from what we have put into our brains over time. I will be calm here because this is important. Since you were a child, you've been putting things on or in your brain. The brain is the organ that sits inside our skull. Now, someone may identify two viable possibilities from the same setup. Another may identify three viable possibilities. Another may identify four viable possibilities. And you ask the question, Dr. Alex, how come from the same scenario that people can identify various numbers of possibilities? The answer is it depends on what they've put on their brain over time. So from a technical side of thinking, here is the challenge I want to give you. To improve our thinking, we must improve our brain. I will spend a lot of time on that in future episodes, but I'm throwing it at this stage because I'm now dealing with the basics. I told you, I'm now entering the basics. So, capture this regarding how the brain then processes this thing. The brain, when you begin to say, I'm evaluating possibilities, it uses fundamentally dualism. The concept of dualism, when you are exercising your thinking and saying, I'm evaluating possibilities, the brain has this dualism point called one side, it thinks of what is the subject here. On the other side, it says what is the object here. So it will always think at a fundamental level in dualism. Remember, one of the reasons many people don't like the thinking process is that we never actually take time and get trained on how to think. So when I say, let's think about this, you don't even know where to start. And so that's what I'm doing with these basics. So understand that when you are going through the many possibilities and looking for viable ones, the brain will operate fundamentally in dualism. One side, the subject, on one side, the object. The second element of the technical side of the thinking process is that while you are going through this, what makes your thinking process effective is to consciously concentrate your focus. Okay, maybe one day we'll deal more about that, I don't know. Here is the trick about the thinking game. When you just say, I now want to start thinking, your mind goes around. Start thinking of your uncle, start thinking of your cousin, start thinking of the other car, start thinking of what you saw on television. That doesn't make your thinking process effective. So that's why one person ends up identifying one option. Another person identified two. Another one all the way to 10, because the more you are able to consciously, watch the words, consciously concentrate your focus around this dualism. Concentrate your focus. When the things come, the thoughts, you cut them off. You concentrate your focus on the dualism. What then makes it effective, I will summarize this into a statement, is that my thinking process is effective if I activate it with a specific, clear intention. Okay, Dr. Alex, you've said so many words. Let's try and understand them a little bit more. When you are applying the three basics I started with, acknowledge that there are always possibilities, identify the viable possibilities with their probabilities, collapse them into a choice. When you are doing this, apply how the brain is processing. Number one, have a clear intention. I said it becomes effective when it's activated with a clear intention. What's the intention of the thinking process you are doing today? What is the purpose of the thinking? The clearer your intention is, the easier you will concentrate your focus. The clearer your intention when you begin the thinking process, the easier you will concentrate your focus. I'm just thinking now that maybe you feel I said too many things today. As I'm saying, you will be empowered to collapse them into winning choices, to collapse the option into winning choices when you are able to, number one, have a clear intention. Number two, concentrate your focus. You will be able to collapse the options into a choice. I want to, as usual, end with a case study. And the case study that I want to give you today is a very important aspect during the evaluation of your options. Let me get my colors right. It was green, blue, orange, red. As you evaluate these options, there is a difference maker coming from the kingdom side. And that difference maker that I want to give you today is very important. Don't run away now. Don't run away. Sit down and make sure you capture this. As part of evaluating the options with the intention of collapsing them into a choice, ask fundamental kingdom questions. You remember what we said in the beginning, that questions are at the core of the thinking process. While you say, which of these options, which of these viable options should I choose? Should I go green, blue, or I collapse green and blue? That becomes my choice. Ask fundamental kingdom questions. What are they, Dr. Alex? Okay. With each case study, I will show you one or show you two. There are questions that will make your thinking process more impactful, which are kingdom questions that you must always ask. case study that we did last episode 3 of 818, was the case study of Adam and Eve. I'll go back to that case study to pull out fundamental kingdom questions. In that case study, we agreed that there are 3 participants, then God. The first participant is Adam, the second one is Eve, the third one is the serpent, and then God. This case study is found in Genesis 3, and you can read, but I just focus my reading from verse 6. When the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye, and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took some and ate it. She also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate it. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they realized that they were naked, so they sewed fig leaves together and made coverings for themselves. Then the man and his wife heard the sound of the Lord God as he was walking in the garden in the cool of the day, and they hid from the Lord God among the trees. Remember the case study. In the case study, we located a few things last week, in last episode, that God regards us as a thinking being above other creation like animals. How we know he regards us as a thinking beings? He asks us questions. In this case study, he asked questions, 3 questions from Adam, and 1 question from Eve, and 0 question to the serpent. I explained last week, I showed you the sequence in the last episode, how that went. Remember the question 1 that was asked from Adam. The first question was, where are you? God does ask us question. The second question he asked him was, who told you that you were naked? The third question he asked him was, have you eaten from the tree that I commanded you not to eat from? And then the fourth question was asked to the woman. And it's that question today that I want us to engage a little bit as we look at fundamental questions when you do the thinking process. That question that was asked to the woman was, what is this you have done? What is this you have done? Remember the story, the case study. They've eaten the fruit of the tree. They have discovered that they have now become naked. They are covering themselves with leaves. They are hiding away from God. And then God shows up, and then God asks them questions because they are thinking beings. This fourth question is interesting, and I want you to think deeply about it today, and I want you to use it very much in your thinking process. The question is, what is it you have done? On the surface, the answer is very simple. You may think the answer is very simple. You could say, Dr. Alex, the answer is, we've eaten from the tree that you said we must not eat. But I want to challenge you that, in fact, this question is way deeper than just answering and saying, we have eaten from the tree. If Adam and Eve, at that time when they were asked this question, had the ability to actually see what they had done, they would have recognized, listen to this carefully, that actually they have opened a door for sin to enter the human race. So when he says, what is this you have done? At the deeper level, what they had done was impact in a way that's beyond their comprehension at the time. They had opened the door for sin. If they had the ability to see what they'd done, they would have seen coming in future generations, all kind of calamities. They would have seen the murders that would happen. They would have seen the mothers and the parents crying when their kids are murdered. They would have seen the rapes. They would have seen the violence that would come, slavery. They would have seen depression, broken hearts. They would have seen, in other words, when the question was, what is this you have done? Is way deeper than just saying we've eaten the fruit. What have you done to open the door for sin? What have you done to impact humanity the way you have done? I want you to see this. The choice, when they collapsed their possibilities, when they looked at that fruit, when that fruit looked appetizing, the choice they made on the day impacted them. They saw themselves naked, but in fact, my friends, it impacted generations beyond their time. When they ate that fruit, when they made a choice, they redefined the destiny of all generations coming after them. Dr. Alex, why are you putting this across? Here is the reason. Remember, when you apply the thinking process to collapse the possibilities to a choice, remember, when you've pursued that choice and produced results, this question will be asked of you. Not only by yourselves, but by your children, by the people around you. You've produced results based on the choice you made, which came from the thinking process. They will ask you, what is this you have done? I therefore am throwing this to you, that during the thinking process, ask these fundamental questions. Don't wait for these questions to be asked of you at the end when your results come. Ask them during the thinking process. Ask the questions like, how will this choice impact me? How will this choice impact those who are around me? How will this choice impact generations to come? I need you to appreciate that during the thinking process, be aware that you are a thinking being. Remember during the thinking process that the choices that you will make, that one choice that you will make, is not just about you, it's not just about the people around you at the time, but it is in fact even about generations to come. You are not an animal. We are unlike animals, that their choices ends with them. But our choices go beyond and beyond. And so, ask kingdom fundamental questions during the thinking process. In other words, as much as these options are all doable, when you try to collapse them to one choice, ask the kingdom questions. Dr. Alex, why do I ask this question? Because you now know, when you make a choice, listen to this carefully. When you make a choice that only satisfies you, that only fulfills you, that only gratifies you at this one time, you are not using the gift of thinking very well. Because no matter what choice you make, at the end of the day, a choice that is made by a thinking being has impact. It impacts the one who's made it, it impacts those who are around them, and it impacts future generations. We are thinking beings. Even though we live inside a biological container, we are beyond animals whose choices has implications only to themselves. I want you to think about this question every time you are doing the thinking process. What is this that you have done? Even though that will be asked at the end, I charge you to ask it at the time you think. Use the gift of thinking very well, because every choice you will make from your thinking will not only impact you, will impact generations to come. We truly love you. I want you to think of these basics that we're throwing in today and the case study that we threw. I want you to imagine if you were Adam and Eve, as your hand was going to the tree, if they had the capacity to imagine what they were doing and what it will do to generations to come, probably they would have made a different choice. What if I could say to you, if you begin to think a bit deeper today, you will make different choices. You will use the gift of thinking very wisely. I challenge you, let's go and think. We truly, truly love you. I'm looking forward to you joining me again as we continue with the next level of basics of the thinking process. I'm looking forward to getting your comments. See you at the top.
Thank you for connecting with us on Extraordinary Exploits with Dr. Alex. We value your connection. Join us every Wednesday at 6:30 p.m. Central African Time. And remember to invite others. Experience extraordinary living.